So first of all, I just want to welcome got Paul Westgate, who is one of my level 4 lecturers and mentors and course leaders. Paul's got a massive experience of education and sport. Uppingham, you were director of sport at Uppingham for a long, long time, Paul, weren't you? And
I was, yeah.
And also involved with Loughborough University rugby programme, and now it's the performance rugby programme at Nottingham University. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. And it'd be good to see some Seaford College boys and girls there.
Yeah, that'd be awesome. That would be awesome. We'll see if we can make that happen. And we've also got Alex Laybourne, ex-Loughborough student and colleague of Mr. Cobb. They caught up earlier on live on Zoom. It was nice to see. We all shed a tear and some virtual hugs going on. But it was really good to see Alex. But obviously, Alex and Paul running Inspiring Coaching as well, which is fantastic for us. And they're going to deliver a great session today. So I'm going to hand over to Mr. Westgate, Mr. Laybourne. I'll be quiet now. I'm looking forward to listening in. So over to you guys.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Well, thank you for having us back. It's great to be back again after the Red to Blue session as well. And thank you very much for the introduction. So really looking forward to today's session. As we sent out beforehand, we're going to look at sort of lifestyle management for the student athlete. Massively important in this, generally speaking anyway, but particularly in the current climate, there's even more kind of emphasis on the sort of lifestyle management, with lots of stuff happening in the same place. So you're studying and you're living and you're socializing and you're doing your sport in kind of very similar places, and then hopefully lots of learning for now and going forwards. I don't need to do introductions because they've kind of been done for us, but that's where we are. Paul and myself founded Inspiring Coaching at the start of the first lockdown, so back in April, and we've been going sort of live since August. So as I said, we're delighted to be here. I wanted to just touch on first, and I know everyone here has seen these. Just wanted to kind of touch on your core values and kind of learning culture, which I know you're trying to embed across your program and across your different sports. And I think just to highlight this really early on, you'll have this in your folders and possibly, hopefully, embedded in your mind. But having looked through the kind of values and culture stuff here, just have a look as the session goes on, whereabouts these are pulled out within the kind of student athlete performance lifestyle piece, as it were. So certainly lots of those learning behaviors, you'll see them coming out as we go through the session. So I guess from our perspective, just highlighting this to you to make sure you make those connections as you go along. We've tried to use some similar wording so that you're able to pull those out more easily. And again, for some of the more senior scholars, you may well be able to make those connections across different areas. So really looking forward to seeing how they connect for you, and hopefully bring into life this for you and performance lifestyle as a theme. There we go. So the student athlete, we just thought we'd frame this for you first in terms of what that is and the way we perceive it. So lots of different kind of ways of looking at it. If you look at the kind of American definition, it's a big thing in America in their colleges. We're looking at it in terms of you as a student in school, completing your whichever year you're in across through to GCSEs and your A levels, but also competing as an athlete at a particularly good level, as a performance athlete at the same time. As again, those who are a bit senior may be looking to transition into university further down the line, or as you move on, you may well eventually see this as a sort of dual career athlete. So again, linking back to maybe Holly Pern-Webb, so she would have been a dual career athlete early on in her career when hockey wasn't full-time and she had a career as well as her hockey. And so you're in a very similar scenario in terms of your studies and your athletic participation are two things that you need to succeed in, and performance lifestyle or lifestyle management is about trying to be successful in both of those areas, as well as still having the rest of your life and your identity that go from there. So just in the chat box, and I'll either ask Mr. Bird or Paul to kind of pull these out. There's just 2 questions up there for you. Just want to get an idea from you as the learners, kind of what do you think as a student athlete, what challenges do you think you face when you're trying to optimize both your sporting performance and reaching your academic goals, and so succeeding as an academic? And then the kind of second question, there may well be some crossover here. What do you think is important for you to perform, or things that may well impact your performance? So if you don't control them, again, as a student or an athlete, what's going to have an impact for you? So just if I give you sort of 90 seconds, minute and a half, if you just put some stuff in the chat box, that'd be really appreciated. Don't be shy.
Yeah, got some good ones come in, Alex. Obviously, time, unsurprisingly, figures quite prominently. The clash behind the academic workload and also working hard in training. I guess sometimes you can work really hard in training. That's going to impact on your studies because you're going to be tired. Quite a few people, saying staying on top of both the performance and also the academic, putting the same amount of effort into both. That's really interesting, isn't it? Because I think human nature means we tend to go to one rather than the other. And I bet for a lot of these young sports boys and girls, it's going to be the sport rather than the academic. Feeling good outside of sport and training. So that's interesting as well, isn't it? So, obviously, if you feel good in your sport, hopefully that will have a positive impact on your studies. Again, looking at time, handling and balancing your time. And as you might expect, social side of things come into it here. How to learn to say no to the social side of things. Turn off the mobile phone, perhaps. Mentally not being drained. Time management again. Feeling good in what you do at the moment. So, I think common themes there, Alex, balancing the studies and the training. Somebody did mention injuries, which is quite interesting as well. Focusing on what's more important. Well, that's big discussion on that, isn't there? What is more important, your sports or your studies? Obviously, the life of a professional athlete is quite short. I think for a professional rugby player, it's on average 7 years. And of course, so therefore, when you finish playing, you've got 40 years of working to sort of, have a career and earn a living. So arguably, studies there would be pretty important. And I think, again, yes, having the correct environment to work. So they're looking at what's important for you to perform, having the environment around you that enables you to achieve your potential. Again, from Fleur, focusing on what's more important. So yeah, some common themes there, Alex.
Yeah, superb. There's some great stuff in there. And there's a lot of stuff that we could pick out as we kind of go along. What's nice there is kind of once a couple of people got going in the chat, everyone kind of jumped in, which is nice as well. So, just to kind of touch on that kind of balancing act, and I won't go too much into it at this stage, but kind of thinking around, because that came up a few times there, Paul, didn't it? That kind of thinking where you've got your sport and your studies, and you'll find that there's this kind of like pendulum, I guess. And there's one way you can find the exact same kind of focus on both. Some of you may well fall more towards the kind of sport side. You put a bit more focus on sport, and therefore your time comes down on what you can do academically. Or it might go the other way, and your academics might go up. And this may well fluctuate as time goes on. So as you get towards your GCSEs and A levels, you might put your academic a little bit above, or if you're going towards, you feel like you might get a contract or a shot at, being with Team GB or Team England, that might push your sport up a little bit. And it's about trying to find the balance on that pendulum that you can succeed in both areas, and have that kind of ability to go away. So, for example, being able to leave Seaford with good A levels and the opportunity to go to, sign a contract or join the performance team with, the performance riding team, or going onto the tennis circuit, for example, or going to Nottingham University, of course, with Paul. So it's about trying to find the ways that we can achieve both. Now, some really good stuff. I just put here kind of some things that I thought you may bring up and stuff that maybe you might miss out. And I think not enough time or organizing yourself, that came up a lot. Things that were kind of not mentioned, and they may well tie into some of the other areas, but sleep and nutrition, kind of things around performance, those, some people might refer to them as 1%ers, or actually there may well be more significance to those. I think well-being, Paul, was touched upon, wasn't it, in terms of how do we feel? And again, we'll talk later about the difference between well-being and sporting well-being and the kind of how you're feeling in those different areas. There was some kind of touched on training, but again, support network, kind of those people around you, whether that's your peers, your staff, parents, other mentors that you have around you. All of these things are really important for you when we look at performance lifestyle and balancing the two. Support network, for example, who can you go to if you are struggling academically, or who can you go to on the sporting side if you need more time academically and get that support. And we know you have that at CFIN. It's about kind of connecting the dots there and understanding where that is. And all of this hopefully will come together as we go through. The last one on there is around knowing yourself and self-awareness. And whenever I talk around performance lifestyle and the life of a student athlete, I think that knowing yourself and self-awareness has to be the starting point. So I look at this in terms of your identity, and I put this here. This isn't a question that you'll be able to answer in one go, but it's certainly one I think if you note down and take away and think about it, I think it will help lots of different areas of your performance. But thinking about how strong your identity is outside of, I'm a rugby, hockey, cricket, tennis, netball player, I'm a rider, I'm a golfer. What are your other interests that sit outside of that? Because I think Paul mentioned injury came up. What happens if you're a rugby player and you attach everything to, I'm first 15 rugby captain at Seaford, and then you're injured and you don't get that 15 season or 7 season, or you don't get that at all? What's your identity? What else do you go back to that motivates you during that time, that allows you to come back out and be refreshed and be that rugby player again afterwards in a sort of refreshed focus, and you continue that motivation? So, example, my name's Trevor, I'm a student, I'm doing my A-levels, I'm also a brother, I like cooking, I like exploring the outdoors. What are those other identities that you have outside of just your kind of sporting side? And then do you give yourself enough kind of time with those areas? Do you get to explore them, especially at your young age? Are you exploring other identities outside of just where you are from a sport and performance side of view? This is going to be really big in your sort of well-being. We'll touch on that on the wheel now, and your sort of give interest section of the wheel, which we're about to touch upon. So this may well be one that you kind of revisit, or you maybe speak to those around you and think around the identity. But I think it's a really important aspect of what we're looking at. So to kind of get to where we are with the performance lifestyle, we're looking at managing these areas of your life so you can be successful both as an athlete and a student. Try and minimize distractions and impact on performance in both settings. So how can I perform as an athlete and a student and succeed in both areas and still have these other identities and kind of interests that I have? So what we use is a performance lifestyle wheel. Paul's put that in the chat. Paul, if you wouldn't mind putting it back in, because I think some of those comments would have pushed it away. So if you did download it, great. If you haven't, it's just coming into the chat now. If you download the wheel, it's on a PDF. So you might want to just, as we go along now, what we're going to ask you to do is to score yourself on this wheel in these different areas on the lifestyle wheel. So the one we're sharing with you is from TAS, which is the Talented Athlete Scholarship Scheme. There are various kind of different wheels. They all use the same sort of format. We're looking for you to kind of score yourself here. 1 is very low, 10 is excellent. One of the things to be aware of, if you do a wheel and everything is between 6 and 8, it's essentially like saying no comment to everything. So be really honest. You don't have to share this with anyone, but what we'll say kind of at the end is actually it's really powerful to share it with someone, whether it's a peer or a mentor or your coach, and that may well be able to kind of identify areas where we can help you balance these areas even better and be a successful dual career or student athlete in this area. So this wheel kind of identifies some of the key areas which will help you be successful as we go along. So hopefully everyone's had a chance to download the wheel. Yeah, as I said, sorry, it's a PDF, so you should be able to add sort of like paint and draw a number into it, or you might want to just kind of draw alongside it. Afterwards, we can get across a kind of more editable version if it's not user friendly, but hopefully it is.
Alex, I'll just pop in a minute.
Yes.
Yeah, I think just to reinforce what Alex is saying, it's really important, young athletes, that you know yourself. And to know yourself, you've got to be honest, you've got to be authentic. And I think that point is made in one of your learning behaviors as part of the Seaford College culture environment. So knowing your triggers, being aware of the different aspects of yourself, your behaviors, your feelings, your beliefs is really important. Now that can be difficult when you're young. I really appreciate that. And, you know, Alex's point about those other identities, well, they're all really important, aren't they? Because they're part of you. It's what makes you up. It's your personality. And so we're not asking you, you know, when you go onto a tennis court or a basketball court or a rugby field to be something that you're not. You know, we want you to be yourselves, because if you're not going to be yourself, if you're not going to be authentic, it's really difficult to achieve. And just a final point, if I may, Alex, sorry, I'm just chattering away here. The two questions Alex asked you to consider earlier about those challenges and the support. Obviously, what happens if we get challenged too much? We actually get under stress and we don't perform, and we get lethargic and we run away and avoid the issues. And if we get too much support and not enough challenge, we get in a real comfort zone and we don't really move forward. So it's getting the balance right between the challenge and the support to create that environment for an optimal performance. But anyway, I'll finish talking now. Just hopefully you can all download the performance wheel. Any problems, just jot a comment in the chat box and I'll send it again. Thanks, Alex.
Thanks, Paul. We promised that we practice this, but actually the next bit is me going, I'm going to hand over to Paul because you've had enough of my voice. So what we're going to do is we're going to take you through the wheel now, and just if kind of as we go through each slide, look to score yourself on there. We're just going to pose some sort of questions to you and maybe some ways of overcoming those or helping you close some of those gaps. So that's going to be the first part that we go through. So hopefully a bit of an interactive one. As Paul said, if you've got any questions, I'll keep an eye on the chat box whilst Paul's covering these first two sections now.
Thanks, Alex. Okay, everyone. So really exciting part now, planning and organisation. So have a think, either with your pen and paper now, or if you've downloaded the wheel, or if you've got it on your laptop and you can actually change it. Have a think of where you're going to score yourself for planning and organisation. Think of 10 being excellent, outstanding. I've got a degree in planning and organisation from Oxford University. Think of 0, 1 as being, it is the worst thing I do. And obviously planning's important. You know, it helps you identify goals. It helps you monitor progress. It can be motivational. We all feel good, don't we, when we've done our tick list and we've achieved something. A question for you: how do you eat an elephant? Pause. One bite at a time, of course, because it's a big thing, isn't it, an elephant? And the point I'm making there is that, you know, when you're planning to do a big task, don't try and have a go at it all in one go and suddenly you give up and then just put it to one side. Think about segmentation, breaking it down into smaller chunks, smaller tasks that you can have a go at. I don't know about you, but deadlines I get very stressed about. And I found one way of coping with deadlines is to set my own deadline before the deadline. So if you've got that history, geography, economics essay for Friday morning, why not set yourself a deadline for Thursday morning? Work to your own deadline and then feel good that you've completed it ahead of the deadline, and give yourself a pat on the back. And of course, you've got a bit of free time on Thursday evening. And, you know, something there mentioned about routine, as well as being organized and feeling in control of your journey. Don't worry if it doesn't happen overnight. Lionel Messi was once famously quoted as saying, "It took me 17 years and 144 days to become an overnight success." You know, these things do take time, and a bit of short-term and long-term planning is really important. But when you do plan, don't mistake planning for doing. At the end of the day, you've got to actually set yourself an action plan, tick it off as you move forward. So hopefully that's been helpful there. So give yourself a score out of 10 for planning and organization. Okay, thanks, Alex.
Cool, you're on the next one as well, Paul.
Okay, given interests. So this is looking at you giving back to others, you giving to yourself. I'll explain that in a moment. And also what other interests you have outside of your sport and studies. There's a difficulty, isn't it, in just throwing everything into your sport or into your studies and just, losing equilibrium, just coming out of balance. So it's always good to get a balance between everything you do. And I would certainly encourage you that any interests that you have outside of sport and studies, it might be another sport, you keep going. So in terms of giving back to others, what do you do in the way of helping others, charity work, community work? Very sad news that Captain Sir Tom Moore recently died. He raised over £32 million by starting out with 100 laps in his garden before his 100th birthday. And isn't it funny that when we give things to other people, quite often we get things back, which may not be tangible, so may not be money, but they can make us feel really good. They can increase our self-worth, our self-value, etc. And of course, Captain Sir Tom became a national treasure, a bit of a hero. And of course, you can give to yourself as well. You've worked really hard. You've ticked off your list. You've achieved some goals. Well, give yourself a pat on the back. Take a bit of time off. Go and have that McDonald's, even though you're really conscious of your nutrition. The occasional McDonald's won't help you. Other fast food outlets, of course, are available. But I think the important thing is to take time to enjoy the journey, helping others, help yourself. And those interests, again, outside of school, reading, watching a series on Netflix, watching videos, doing another sport, it can be so good for you. If you're a rugby player, perhaps doing a sport like basketball can help you balance, playing a bit of tennis can help your footwork, etc. There's so much transferability there, isn't there? Why not take up a bit of juggling and help develop your hand-eye coordination? So again, be yourself. Don't focus on one thing to the exclusion of everything else. Being a more rounded, balanced individual will help you both on the sports field and off the sports field. So, as I say, give yourself a mark out of 10 as to give an interest, and then we'll come back and look at that later. Thank you, Alex.
Great, thanks, Paul. So as Paul said, you should hopefully have two scores now in those two segments of 1 to 10. I just put in the chat, if you're struggling to download it, just score yourself 1 to 10 in the area, and we'll make sure you get a copy of the wheel as it is afterwards. So relationship and support network. I touched upon this at the start, and actually, Paul and I were discussing before this session around building relationships, especially at a young age. And it's something you can do, but actually you have a lot of support doing it where you are. Being in the environment where you are, you get supported through building those relationships. But it's thinking about how can you become better at building relationships without that support. So, if you are, building relationships with your peers who you're in classes with and your staff who you see regularly, but can you build relationships with those in the wider CFA community? So the cleaner that comes in and cleans the first 15 changing room after a fixture, do you know who he or she is? Do you know their name? Do you speak to them? The catering staff who feed you after fixtures, do you know who those people are? Can you, as young athletes, build those relationships with the people that support you in achieving what you want to achieve? Because you're supported through building some of the more obvious relationships. Can you build some of those other ones? And that becomes really powerful. I know mentioned right at the start that Mr. Cobb came and said hi, on the screen. Actually, that relationship started, I'm going to show age here, but like 15 years ago back at Loughborough, and actually still were able to jump on and have a conversation and shed a tear, as we said at the start. But actually building those relationships that then will last a sort of lifetime, and that those people will support you on your journey. And then thinking about your support network. So when we're talking about here again, you know, parents, your best friend, your boyfriend, your girlfriend, other staff. Again, you've got lots of support network in place. Is there anyone else that you go to for support? Do you have a, you know, when you get a bit older, again, those transitioning through A level into university, who will you stay in touch with? Who stays part of your support network in the future? Will you find a mentor that can help you go through and go beyond and help you achieve? Who's going to challenge you? And again, as Paul said earlier, but you're going to be getting comfortable being uncomfortable and finding someone that will challenge you to get better. Do you have those people around you? Are you surrounded by them? And again, can you build those relationships with them? And then I guess as part of that, how well do you reach out to others for that feedback? And it's a really difficult one. I'll be honest with you. It took me until I was probably into my 20s before actually I would be comfortable reaching out and having difficult conversations. And I say to, you know, when I was head of rugby in a school before this, so that was one of the things I was really keen to encourage with those athletes was actually, you know, reach out now, be uncomfortable. It's a great skill to have at this age. So just think there where you're scoring yourself, how could you think you are building the relationships that are there, but you know, wider relationships, and how good are you at developing a support network again outside of kind of necessarily what your core is? And if you know, even do you know who's in your core support network? One thing might be worth doing wider to this when you go elsewhere is just mapping it out. Put yourself in the middle. Who are the people you go to for different support, academic, emotional, sporting? Is there any crossover with those type of people? Do you need to further kind of develop that relationship with those people?
Alex, I just reinforce what you're saying there, everybody. Yeah, and absolutely surround yourself with people who will support you and believe in you. I think that's really, really important. But be careful, it's not an echo chamber. An echo chamber is where we seek people out who tell us what we want to hear. But of course, that's not always a good thing. We need people that we can trust, that can be truthful for us and tell us if we're not working hard enough. And actually, just a thought occurred to me there of, I don't know if you've heard of the phrase energy sappers and energizers. Again, you'll want to surround yourself by energizers, people that energize you, that support you, that believe in you, that are positive towards you, and are truthful towards you. What you don't necessarily want is the energy sappers. So those people that drain you, that say you're not good enough, that fill you with negativity, that criticize you or over criticize you, etc. So getting that balance right is really important. Sorry, Al.
No, that's great. And it actually leads really well on to the kind of next section in terms of well-being. Those people you surround yourself are going to have a massive impact in your well-being. And you may or may not have seen this before, you know, so some of the staff probably have done, but actually if you talk around, you know, people say if you introduce them to your 5 closest friends or the 5 people you spend the most time with, they'll be able to identify some of like the majority of your traits. So who are those people you're spending lots of time with, and do they make you feel better? But part of that well-being is things like, how do you switch off? Do you switch off at all? You know, are you able to get away from your phone? Are you able to get away from thinking about sport or thinking about study? So when you're in exam period, is that what you think about? You're like, well, I've got to revise, I've got exams, or are you able to switch off and go away? And you know, and sometimes actually using sport is the way to do that. You switch off from your academics by going to sport, and you maybe get relaxed from your sort of sporting endeavors by going through into your academics or one of your other wider identities and interests that you have. Do you think about the bigger picture? Do you think about kind of, again, as young people, can you think further afield? Can you think long term? What are your interests? What does your future look like in terms of where do you want to go? What are those sort of interests that you might want to follow outside of kind of just what's happening the next day or the next or even the next few hours? And then a really important, I think Paul, you're going to jump in here, aren't you, on the kind of sleep side of stuff? Just before I kind of pass over to Paul. Sorry. One thing I find with athletes, so I mentor a lot of student athletes at Loughborough. So these are people who are on the pathway to, well, they are basically preparing to go to Olympic Games or to Commonwealth Games or to leave Loughborough and go into full-time contract or you know, for example, those at Lightning, netball or rugby, they're studying a degree and they're performing at the elite level. And when you talk to them, often when you're looking at things like planning and organization, you go, well, they go, I need more time to work. So you ask them how they're going to find that time. And the first thing young athletes do is they go, well, I'll get up 2 hours earlier, or I'll go to bed 2 hours later. And it's the first thing to go when they're trying to find time. So rather than organizing and being more efficient around them, they go, I'll just cut out some sleep. I can stay up 2 hours later. But if you stay up until 1 o'clock in the morning and then you're up again at 6 to go into school to maybe have a gym session or to have lessons, or you've got a fixture on the Saturday of some form, what knock-on impact does that have? So just thinking about your sleep, how good are you at kind of regulating your sleep time? I know some of you are probably sleeping like 17 hours a day, possibly, you know, but is the balance where you maybe have?
Is there any way of checking, Mr. Doubler, that the students aren't asleep at the moment?
I can have a little look around.
Yeah, Alex makes a really good point there, everybody. Sleep is just so important. And I don't know if you've heard of the phrase sleep hygiene, but this idea of creating a routine in your bedroom, a going to sleep routine where, you know, all the technology is switched off. Don't have your phone by your bed. Don't have your laptop by your bed. Don't have the TV on in your room, because all it does is excites your body. The body is expecting or waiting for the TV, the phone, the laptop to be switched on again. I guess we've all felt tired during the day and haven't been at our best. Perhaps you're in a history lesson and you're fairly tired. Now, it may be because it's the teacher, I don't know. But equally, it may be because you didn't get a good night's sleep. And, you know, it's something to explore. We're all different. We all probably need different amounts of sleep, but there are some constants. It is recommended practice that you generally go to bed when you're tired. Now, that doesn't mean to say you can get up late and go to bed at 3 o'clock every morning, because you're not tired until 3 in the morning, but you need to get into your body's circadian rhythm. But particularly in the morning, it's always good to get up at a regular time in the morning to sort of start the day off. Even if you're really tired, get up at the same time in the morning and your body clock can sort of get into that. But Alex is right. If there's one thing we all want, or you would want, I guess, in your lives, is time to do everything that you want to do. But of course, you need to manage your time and ensure that while you're awake, you can be as productive as possible.
My sleep section's pretty low with a 2-year-old, so I certainly would like more sleep than that. Cool. Paul, do you want to pick up the academic?
Yeah, hi everybody. Look, obviously, mark yourselves on the academic. Don't mark on what you think you're going to get in the exams. Be honest on where you are at the moment, and look at it overall. Look at your work patterns, how your study is generally going. Look, some subjects are going to be going really well, absolutely, particularly ones you love and really like. Other subjects, oh, well, I don't particularly like that subject. It's not going so well. But try and look at it overall. You know, are you pretty good at getting your homework done? Are you pretty good at getting assignments completed on time? Are you proactive in the classroom? Do you ask questions? Are you curious as a learner? I always think back to the Steve Jobs quote, you know, Steve Jobs, who founder of Apple, who talked about be curious, don't worry about making mistakes, stay hungry, stay foolish, etc. And I think curiosity is one of the most important things you can have as a learner. So, you know, give yourselves a mark for how the academic's going. It is important because whenever your life as a part-time professional, as a professional, or even just as an amateur sports person, whenever it finishes, you've got to go out and also work. Not many people can be paid for being a professional sportsman and have a long sports career. So you will need to have a career. You will need to get A-levels to go to university. My son was very fortunate enough to go to a University of New Mexico down in southwest of the US. He went over there on a tennis scholarship. So he was playing tennis 6 hours a day, which was absolutely terrific. He wasn't a great academic. When we went over and stayed with him, we met the tennis coach, etc. I was amazed at how much importance they attached to the studies. So Mark had, I think, fortnightly grades that were given on his work, And if his grades fell below a certain standard, then he wasn't allowed to train. And this was at quite a high tennis university as well. Actually, he did pick a good university, because I don't know what you're like, but sometimes at the beginning of the season, you look at the fixtures, don't you? And see, all right, we're away here, we're home here. I'm glad about that. I don't like going away to that school. And of course, in their Southwest Tennis Conference, one of their fixtures was Hawaii. So of course, every year they'd look on the fixture list and see if they were away at Hawaii this year or at home. And he managed in his 3 years at college to be away at Hawaii twice. So I think the tennis tournament finished quite quickly, and then they spent 2 days on the beach. But look, just a final point there about the in-competition question that Alex has put down. Balancing your studies when you're, performing, when you're having a big fixtures come up, or where you're in competition, is really important. And hopefully some of you can remember back to the Building Resilience Using Mental Skills webinar that I delivered, where, performing under pressure was all about thinking clearly, focusing your attention, knowing your triggers, and knowing how to move from red head to sort of blue head. And that could certainly sort of help there. But, managing both obviously is important, and it's possible if you can put down some routines to help you.
Great stuff. And yeah, and then what you'll find on there is two kind of other sections, your sport and your finance, and I guess in the sporting element is kind of scoring yourself where you feel how you feel your sport is going. So where do you feel in that? And again, honesty is the best way here. You don't have to share this. It's a really useful tool for yourself in terms of thinking, how are you going in your own sport, how are you perform, or sports, sorry. So, and how are you performing? How's your, think back to the academic stuff. What's the bigger picture stuff? How am I performing across all of them? How well do I prehab or rehab? How good is kind of all of the stuff that's attached to my sporting performance? Think about at the moment, not much or not any competition going on. How prepared are you at the moment in terms of, if sport started, could you jump back into it at that stage? So where do you feel like you're at this moment in time with sport? And we'll touch about how in the next slide, how you kind of revisit this. So this is a kind of moment in time. So don't think about kind of how good am I at sport? So, how good a tennis player am I, or how good a golfer or rugby player am I? Think about how your sport is going. How are you in terms of as a performer when you're in season, or how kind of prepared are you at that stage? And then Paul, did you want to pick up the finance?
Yeah, only that, in some sports, money, can make an impact on your participation, on your performance, can't it? Some sports are more important. They demand more input financially, probably from mum and dad, than other sports. I remember driving my son around to various sort of tennis training and tennis matches, and then paying for his coach, etc. It becomes quite important. So it's, I guess here, probably not one for you to fill out, but one for you to be aware of, particularly when you leave school, going to university, or going to a sport in a more full-time capacity. You'll need to manage your finances. Obviously, lots of parents make sacrifices for their children when they're young, so don't ever forget what the mums or dads are doing for you. And just a quick word on the sport one. You can do the wheel as a sports wheel. So, have a blank wheel and put around the outside, technical, tactical, physical, mental, etc. You could even break the technical down into the technical components for your specific sport, and then score yourself there. And you can share that with your coach. You can even share it with a friend, a fellow player, and help each other. And it may be that you've given your tennis backhand 6 out of 10, but your fellow tennis player says, you know what, your tennis backhand's not too good. You're being a bit harsh on yourself there. So again, use this wheel in different ways for different situations to really help you understand more about yourself and your current sort of standard, if you like, to use that to help you to where you want to get to. Thanks, Alex.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Paul. So like we said there, probably don't score yourself on finance. That's, I guess, as you transition out Well, it might be if you're financing a lot of it yourself. So if you're work, some of the sixth formers possibly working to pay, things like subs and equipment, etc. But certainly as you leave home and you leave post 18, it may well be that you're relying on funding from your NGB, or you've got a student loan, or you need to pick up a job as well. And so all those things impact it, and you'll see longer term where that connects. So things like nutrition. So on some wheels, you'll see nutrition on itself. And again, at Loughborough, someone scored themselves lower on nutrition. They said, well, I can't because I can't afford it. So then you have the conversation about finance, and then the finance conversation turns out that, they're having to pick up a job, and that job's impacting on their sleep and their well-being. And that's where you start seeing some of those connections and opening up some of those other questions. So it's just one to be aware of. Is hopefully you'll find this useful and start to kind of embed it in terms of what you use as a student athlete. And so over time, you'll start seeing that finance has an impact there. Like I said, on other versions, Paul's already mentioned that you can change it up, but actually, there's also other kind of versions. So again, the Loughborough one, for example, there's a section there on anti-doping. Some of you may well be moving into that world where your NGB or the environments you're in are educating you more on anti-doping anyway, and your requirements to understand different areas. So, again, the higher performance you get, your understanding around anti-doping is going to become important, and you might want to add it on to go, well, actually, my understanding's not great now, but I need to know more in the future, and that will help you kind of close that gap. You might see future planning or transition. So again, some of the upper sixth scholars in here, you may well be thinking about that transition from A levels into university, and what does that mean? So things like you might want to study, and you've probably got the support of your head of sixth form and your tutors at the moment. When you go into university, you've got to think about post-university, what happens on the way out. So you probably see transition in there a little bit. And you can also break up wellbeing into your sporting wellbeing and your wellbeing. I had a conversation with an athlete today, actually, who's taking a year off football because essentially his sporting wellbeing was so low. And that came from the lockdown, lack of competition, a few injuries. And we kind of saw it coming, because the sporting wellbeing, every time we do the wheel every 3 months, and it was coming down, and his wellbeing was high, and he was enjoying his job, and he was enjoying his course, and he had lots of good stuff going on, but his sporting wellbeing was dropping. So we kind of framed that conversation between me, him, and his coach around what would the best thing be to do. So again, his sport was actually quite high, but his sporting well-being was low because his sport was going well, but he wasn't enjoying it. So sometimes you can see those on other versions, and you may well want to add it onto your own wheel if you see some of those things that are important. And like I said, nutrition is one that sometimes will come up. So depending on the sort of value you have there, again, at the moment, you're pretty well, most likely pretty well supported with your nutrition from home and school, etc. Once you leave the school, you have a bit more kind of emphasis on yourself in terms of learning how to cook and what you cook in there. I think, is there something on the I was just like that, someone's come up in the chat, but it's Paul's put it in the chat. So yeah, I guess I'm going to hand over to Paul for sort of what now, about kind of what this looks like now. If there are any questions, do just put them in the chat whilst Paul's talking about kind of how the numbers you've got, how these then turn into an actionable thing for you to do.
Yes, so having a look at all of the scores that you've now collected, everybody, the question to ask yourself under each of those segments is, if I've given myself a 6 out of 10 for academic, how my studies are going, how can I get that to an 8? Where should that be? So you now need to go around all the areas and just score where you think you should be, perhaps where you'd like to be, and then the challenge is, how do I then close the gap? So, for example, studies aren't going very well. I've given myself a 5 out of 10. I know I've got to be up 7 or 8 out of 10 if I want to get the 3 A's to go to Durham, Loughborough, Exeter universities, etc. So how do you then close that performance gap, as it's known? How do you move the 5 to the 8? And the obvious way is for you then to sit down and talk to your teachers, or be honest with yourself and think, well, okay, I've got to work a bit harder. I've got to put a bit more time in. I've got to ask for some extra help. I've got to have some extra lessons, whatever it might be. And then that helps you then formulate, if you like, a plan moving forward. So it may not be that you can go forward in every area, but what stands out to you? What are the priorities? Okay, now I can get a sports scholarship on an unconditional offer, so therefore the academic grades at A level may not be so important. I really do need to spend some more time on my sport because I'm not quite where I want to be. I need to improve my tennis rating. I need to be selected for the regional squad in hockey or whatever it may be. And then if that is then your priority, then again, a good conversation to have will be with your coach. How can I then close that gap? How can I close that space? And finally, then perhaps a thing to consider is ask yourself, where would you like to be in 6 months? A year is probably too far. 2 years is probably much too far away. But in 6 months' time, I'd like to be in a better space. Well, here's 2 or 3 areas that I can now focus on to help me be in a better space. So hopefully, Alex, that's been helpful there.
Yeah, no, that's great. And I think, like Paul says, it's about revisiting the wheel. So if you set those goals for 6 months' time, it's a form of goal setting, isn't it? And then come back to it in 6 months and see whereabouts are you with those. Has something gone up or has something gone down? Well-being might be one to keep an eye on. And think what's been successful in closing that gap, or what hasn't been successful, or by focusing on a different area, has something else dropped? And over time, you'll start seeing some of those patterns and see where that support, you can get that support from. And again, that will link back to your sort of support network and those relationships you're building. Just want to build on quickly something Paul said there as well around, you can speak with someone else about it, which is really, really valuable. But there's also an element where he mentioned, just be honest with yourself. And like I said earlier, I know that's difficult. It's a skill to learn, but actually, how self-aware can you be? And it might be that you start by looking at it and you go, right, I need to be really honest with myself. This is where I'm at. This is where I'd like to be. And then you don't share that with anyone, because then but actually you don't have to share that with anyone, but yourself that that's where you need to improve. Or it might be, if you really want to challenge yourself, you be really honest with yourself, and then you find someone that you really trust to share that with. And that might be a peer, that might be a peer mentor, or that might be a member of staff. But there's plenty of ways to kind of skin a cat, as they say, in terms of finding a way to do that. So hopefully that's given you we believe, really powerful tool to use, not just now to give you a starting point, but also to open up conversations, but also kind of for the future. And again, if you've got any questions or you want to explore it further, just get in touch with us either on the chat or by email afterwards if anything comes up. But what we also wanted to do was just to share with you some of the things around the here and now. And I appreciate time I was running on. You've been on calls all day. But obviously COVID-19 has created we're in the third lockdown. I hope you're dealing with it as well as you can. I'm sure you've got the support around you from the Seaford community. But obviously it's highlighted challenges for student athletes a lot. So think about sporting wise, motivation may well have been impacted, access to training, certainly your access to competitions limited. How do you cope with that? Does it impact on your well-being? Has it meant you've had to change your goals? Has it ruined goals that you had set? So, were your eyes on being selected for England 18s? And then that's gone because that age grade program is not working. Was it to be selected for a certain tournament by the NGB, etc.? So they're gone. Have you found a way of creating new goals for you? And maybe have you reached out to your support network, or have they reached out to you in terms of what that might look like? And that's certainly a massive challenge for, especially if we talk about that balance we had right at the start, and sport is sitting above your academics, and all of a sudden that's gone. And, sometimes that sport is you motivated to achieve academically because you need 3 A's to go to Loughborough or to Exeter, or to be part of their performance program. So that can be a challenge. And then, academics, again, a massively new way of learning. Paul and I had set up, a handful of conferences to run face to face, and all of a sudden we're going, we need to find a way of delivering our conferences online. And Paul's learning how to clip videos. Paul's ahead of me on that, so my clipping of videos isn't great. So Paul's actually leading on the tech side for us. So everyone's kind of learning new skills, and again for you, it's new ways of learning. How do you draw from this, and not the ability to necessarily for us to have the face-to-face interaction? You've got to kind of pull from these as we go through and maybe reflect and come back to it.
Alex, I'll just jump in there really quickly. Obviously, everybody, really tough times at the moment with the pandemic, but just share with you two stories that are happening up at the University of Nottingham. One is I'm a lifestyle mentor to a very talented golf player, Morgan Thomas. I think she's one of the top players in the country. She's actually created a net in her back garden, which is literally, a blanket, I think, that she puts over a washing line, so she can practice her swing and hit golf balls at it. And the head of men's lacrosse, who I also am a lifestyle support advisor to, he's gone around recently and produced some cards that he's put into everyone's letterboxes around where he lives, offering his services to help them if they need things collected from shops or from the pharmacy, etc. So two examples there, one of giving to others. He's got time on his hands, obviously the head of lacrosse. And Morgan, she's not using the COVID, the pandemic, as an excuse for not keeping up as best she can with the sport. She's actually created, as I say, that temporary, I hope, or mum hopes anyway, temporary golf net in the back garden.
Thanks, Paul. It's really powerful, isn't it? Real life stories, really powerful, and hopefully you can take some stuff from that resonates to your own experience. Like I said, the wheels are really useful tools. A couple of other things that we thought might be useful, and again, these are, you've got to, it's not one size fits all. What suits you. Paul's just going to drop this in the chat and the next one, so we'll kind of go over it, but you'll be able to download a copy of this, and if not, we'll make sure that a copy of it, you can get access to a copy of it. But just one thought around setting up an optimum environment, and this will translate post-COVID as well. But things like, how are you going to perform each day? So as a student athlete, how do you get the most out of your day or your week, etc. Thinking about setting up for a good start of the day. So if you're going running in the morning, do you set your kit out early? If you've got, have you set out which subjects you've got the next day? Are they out ready for you to study? So when you're studying at home, for example, are you scrambling around for your maths book or your English book, or do you know where each of them are because you've prepared the day before? And again, Paul mentioned getting up at the same time every day. Do you set it? And something I've started doing is that my alarm now is downstairs, and if I don't get to it in time, it wakes up the 2-year-old and the dog, and then I'm in all sorts of trouble. So I have to get out of bed to get down to do them. I've started running more, and I do the same thing and lay the kid out, and they're skills that will kind of stay with you for life. Digital environment, this will be huge for you boys and girls, is kind of, can you get rid of your low value or time wasting apps on your phone? Can you take notifications off either permanently or at certain times of the day? So you're in school and you've got X amount of lessons. Can you turn your notifications off between that sort of 9 and 4 time, so that you're not being distracted by those? Or maybe it's between 6 and 8 when you want some of that family time, that other identity, so you can spend time and conversation with people face to face when you've been on screen all day. And it might be that you add in apps that have different, think about being a curious learner. Do you replace them with something else that's maybe an educational app or a news app, that's coming up? I touched on goals already, but things you might have is, once you've got your goal, do you put it up? So I use that example with one of the students I'm mentoring. Got a GB vest, picture of a GB vest on the mirror in the morning. So she goes to the mirror and she sees the GB vest picture there, that's from there. And that kind of hygiene side of stuff, so hand washing, but also that kind of sleep hygiene, general hygiene. Do you get up in the morning, have a shower, get dressed into normal clothes, and you're ready to go for the day? Or do you try and go through school in your pajamas and maybe change your top, because that's all anyone can see? So thinking about those as an optimum environment. And then from a studying point of view, again, these are in the chat, so I won't go through all of these, but thinking about when you're studying at home, loads of different stuff. Some people like music on, quietly in the background. Some people like it being completely quiet. Lighting's important. I apologise, I've realised that's been probably over my face most of the time. But kind of where do you sit in the house? Have you got the curtains open? Talked about clothes. How are we sitting? What's your screen like? Do you vary? The variation in there, that sort of penultimate point. I did a anti-doping session, and the co-deliverer was standing the whole time, and that's kind of why that came in, standing on a sort of using the ironing board, and so he varied his delivery and gave him that little bit more energy. So both of those sort of mini documents, hopefully there's some takeaways there, and it might be just one or two bits from each that kind of give you a little bit of a chance to have that optimum environment to towards your studying at home and towards your sort of student athlete lifestyle in terms of setup. So I think going to go to Paul for the takeaways, and I'll jump in if needed and change of voice.
Hi everyone, 30 seconds. We've just gone over our limit, so thank you for staying with us. Find a balance, really important. If your dining room table is not balanced and you put a ball on top, it's just going to roll off. Understand the challenges. We're all different. Nobody's perfect. There's no problems with you having different challenges to somebody else, but be aware that there are support mechanisms there to help you. Take time to understand yourself, be authentic, be self-aware. It doesn't always pay to be authentic though. Charlie Chaplin once famously the real Charlie Chaplin participated in a Charlie Chaplin lookalike competition and came 17th. So it just shows, doesn't it? Do use the performance wheel to self-reflect, monitor your progress, set your goals and drive action, and do create your own optimum environment. Remember, no one size fits all. Do what works for you, and all the very best to everyone, you young athletes in all your sports, and getting that balance right so you can achieve in the classroom and on the sports field. The very best to you. So that's it from me, Alex. I don't know if you want to wrap up quickly.
No, just a massive thank you for your time. We appreciate, like we said at the start, long day. Hopefully there's some, at least a handful of takeaways for you, and if nothing else, kind of looking across at what some of your learning, your culture and values are across from CFID, and seeing there's some stuff that there's some crossover there. But thank you very much for your time. We appreciate it, and we look forward to seeing you again soon.
Absolutely. Thank you, Mr. Doublet.
Thank you, guys. Absolutely brilliant.
Thanks, sir.
Lots of great takeaways. And,
Thank you.
the guys.
Thank you.
They're all shouting thank you. Great session, guys. Really appreciate it. And we look forward to seeing you again next half term.